Well, hey there. I am so glad you joined us today. I'm your host, Cindy Watson. I hope you've got a copy of my book, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, How to Get What You Want. And obviously, thanks for joining us here today at our podcast of the same name. I'm really excited to introduce you to Edina Mauvana. Welcome, Edina. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Cindy. It's so great to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited about the conversation. For our listeners, we're going to be talking about how the art of ascension can help us with the art of negotiation. So something a lot of you probably don't know a lot about. And if you don't know Edina Mauvana is a spirituality consultant, and she's the creator of the Unity Consciousness Collective. And her new book is hot off the press as well, called Ascension is the New Attraction. And she's also the host of Into the Light podcast, which is new as well. So make sure to be checking those out. And I invite all of you as well, keep a really open mind. I've been doing some different stuff recently as well, because I'm a big believer that all of life is a negotiation. And, I think that part of that is really being open to trying on new ideas and making sure that we aren't so certain about the correctness of our old deep conditioning that we're willing to reframe and reboot. So why don't you kickstart us, Edina? This is kind of an unusual life pursuit. I'd be really interested how you came to study Ascension.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, Ascension is definitely the theme of my work right now. I am doing things like Ascension awareness campaigns. I'm doing Ascension journey mapping in my consulting practice, my spirituality consulting work. And I'm talking to a lot of other thought leaders, authors, spiritual healers and mentors and coaches. And it's all revolving around concepts about ascension. And this is new to a lot of people, and I'm here to, start talking about it more. And I loved how in the beginning you said the art of negotiation and the art of ascension. And it is really an art, and it's kind of like, everyone has heard of the law of attraction, right? And I'm sure you've had guests talking about law of attraction in their life and negotiating and activating those principles of the universe. And so ascension is a very similar concept. It's based off of the principles of we're like energy bodies on the planet, and we're vibrating at a certain frequency, and we're attracting that frequency to us and elevating our emotions to reach, higher and higher levels of attraction, right? And ascension is happening in this time and place here with humanity and everyone on Earth. It's whether we know it or not, or whether we're plugged in or not, doesn't matter. But it's based off of the spiritual awakening, that global human consciousness awakening, things like that are happening where, people are increasing our frequencies in this process that the whole earth is going through. So I became fascinated with that. And that's what I decided to start writing about and really focusing my work on.
That's so cool. And it amazes me. I mean, people who still stay so tunnel vision about their limited sort of beliefs about the world and what, because, you think back in the 60s or whatever, if you look back to those days, they were talking about some of this stuff back then, and everybody thought it was crazy and woo-woo and called them hippies and worse. And now the science is really catching up on a lot of this stuff about the energies. And it's like, so who looks silly now, right?
Right. And I talk to experts in the field of like quantum physics and quantum energy healing. And even that whole field has been like, oh, this is like pseudoscience. And however, a lot of that is starting to be proven, true, and understanding of time and space and sacred geometry and things like that in the universe. And so I have actually a Muslim background. So I come from a different spiritual tradition than a lot of people. I think there's, a lot of Christians and people who have moved toward law of attraction. And I certainly became attracted to those principles of the universe and everything. But then I became really interested in what you're talking about with the quantum understanding of reality and all this information about science. And so that's just from my own personal interests, like where I was like, oh, I want to learn more and more about this stuff. And like you said, there were hippie woo-woo people talking about it since the 70s, and now here we are. So
well, I went to a Joe Dispenza event, and I wasn't sure what I was going to think, because I was still like, I don't know what this is. And it was really eye-opening, right? And he's so heavy on the science, backing everything up for that credibility piece. So I found that really interesting. And you mentioned about Muslim. I thought you did something. What was it? Not your typical Muslim movement or something? What was that?
So I have some social media activity. And like I said, I've been doing advocacy and awareness campaigns. And one of the things that I started was the hashtag not that kind of Muslim
Not that
campaign on
kind.
so yeah. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like, the hashtag, and it's, kind of like, I don't know, the Me Too movement or the breakthrough movements where we're like, Muslim is a certain identity. And
Yes.
I certainly get called, things just because of the way I operate, and, oh, I'm not Muslim enough, or you're not Muslim enough. And, I really find that problematic in our belief systems, and like calling
Yeah.
people, oh, you're not Christian enough if you're this, or
Yes.
Muslim enough if you're that. This is all activism kind of work to try and break free of those concepts and redefine how we view people
Yeah.
and be more judgment free zone,
I really
hashtag
like
judgment
that
free zone.
on so many levels. I mean, I've been a social justice attorney for 30 years before I started Women on Purpose. So, I mean, I feel like my entire life has been dedicated to, fighting against discrimination and encouraging open mind and acceptance and lack of judgment and all of these things. But particularly since I started the art of feminine negotiation, I think at its core, it's actually based on that, like this
Of
idea
course.
that we've been so conditioned to pit ourselves against each other with our entire world model based on this competitive view of life where it's win or lose. And we're always trying to get power over other people rather than power with. And at its core, it's all about opening up. I mean, look at COVID. There were legitimate positions on both sides of the scale, but people were so polarized and that need to be correct that none of the dialogue that should have been happening did. And I think the world shifts out of balance. So I love all the work you're doing for all of those reasons. And when we met, you raised this interesting perspective, that really piqued my interest about this idea about ascension being the new attraction and that it's key to effective negotiating. So let's dig right into that. I'd love if you can elaborate on that. Like, how can understanding ascension help us negotiate more effectively, both personally and professionally?
Right. Well, I think in this process of ascension, you are making decisions, it's a process of negotiating life, really, right?
Yes.
When it comes down to it, we are doing things like proving our reactions to triggers in our life and identifying pattern behavior and getting over, self-limiting beliefs and things like that. Normal things that people are negotiating every day, their response to things. And that whole process is basically principled on responding to things more positively, having a more positive energy, not getting
Yeah.
reactionary and things like that. So all of those are negotiations, frankly, on a day-to-day level, just using your heart center and
Yeah.
being more balanced in your reaction. And, so all of that is really the process of activating these laws of the universe, right?
And just before you dig into that, and I do want you to unpack it, but I bow down on that because I
Oh,
must say most people don't see these things as a negotiation. And it's one of the obstacles I find always as I move forward is it's like this multi-step process. Because first I have to get people to even think about the fact that all of life is a negotiation, whether we're negotiating our own mindset, which I'd love you to circle back to at some point, but negotiating with our kids or intimate partners, service
mhm.
providers, multi-million-dollar deals, all of it is a form of negotiation. And I love that you said negotiating life because I am a huge advocate that all of life is a negotiation. I think recognizing that is a key. So before we dig into sort of more formal sort of negotiations in Ascension, I'd love your thoughts on negotiating your mindset sort of through this concept of Ascension as well. Because I always say negotiating your mindset is our first and most important negotiation. So how can your work help with that?
Yeah, so I have a lens of understanding the universe, like the way I talk about religion and spirituality is through these lenses and creating new ways of viewing things. Like, I talked about the energy and how we're all beings doing this. For me, when it's negotiating, I always am trying to balance like my heart or my emotional intelligence with like my logical intelligence. And
Yes.
this is like
Yeah.
a fine line that we're always like walking every day, and we're trying to get results from certain people, and we're activating our logic versus our emotion. And so I have like for myself developed like a empathy based, like kind of test that I use, where I try and develop my own empathy and my own emotional intelligence in every interaction. And I do like empathetic litmus tests is what I call it. Like when you're testing to
Love
see if
it.
someone is responding with pathetic reaction or versus like their more ego driven
Yeah.
reaction. And once you start, it's almost like an art of measuring how to respond to every situation based off what's coming at you. And so that kind of goes into what you're talking about with like mindset reprogramming. And some people are challenged where they need to develop more of an emotional intelligence of empathy of some kind, or they have blockage there, or they need to develop healthier boundaries in other cases, and they're like the empath wounds are too deep,
Yeah.
and so they're all, everyone's healing on these certain paths and in these certain ways. And so I've identified empathy as really the root of all of our wisdom and tapping into the power of that, and that leads into this intuition and abilities we have and quantum healing, so all of that is driven through our heart and connecting with that emotional intelligence that's in there. Like emotional,
Yeah.
some people describe it like the emotional guidance system has been written about in books and things.
You are so speaking my language, Edina, let me tell you. I mean, my God. And the fact that you talk about that heart versus logic, for so like all of the traditional negotiate, to the extent that we're taught negotiation at all, which is very little, frankly, and it boggles my mind given what it probably one of the most important skills we'll ever learn. But we're really taught that this is logic based. And I remember being taught emotion has no place in a negotiation. And we are humans. We are
Is that
emotional beings. It is so counterintuitive. So
that's like code for the women have no place at the negotiating table, right? We went from that to this. And so much of this work, like you talked a little bit earlier about that feminist kind of way that we're viewing things, and a lot of the work that's happening right now is all like because of divine feminine energy coming into the universe, and that's part of this ascension process. And even me with my work, like I have the hashtag not that kind of Muslim campaign, because I'm trying to break down, problems of patriarchy and the way that the ego has created these problematic situations in our belief systems. And, so all of that is my larger agenda, which is really dismantling the ego and the patriarchal problems of society and the world and all of humanity. So
well, and thank you to speaking to divine feminine energy, because I'll be honest with my book, as you heard, is called The Art of Feminine Negotiation. And I really agonized over whether to use the word feminine, because I knew I'd get pushback for a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which is that gender attributions are kind of on their way out, which is a good thing. But I thought, you know what, right now where we are today, this is still an issue. I mean, there's been such deep-seated conditioning for both men and women to stifle our feminine, because we've been taught to see it as a liability, right? And I was guilty. In my early years as a lawyer, I was known as the barracuda, which they meant as the highest compliment, which shows you how deep the problem is, right? So until I had my epiphany. So I really love that. To me, this idea about the feminine, I do think certainly women have been really adversely impacted much more. But I think both men and women would serve to lean into our feminine energies more. And we all have both masculine and feminine energy. And I think it's one of the reasons the world's so out of balance is that we're not bringing that empathy and rapport building and compassion, bringing that heart to the table in our negotiations. And until we reframe how we look at that, get away from that competitive model and move to a more collaborative one. And I love that you talk about ego, because again, we tend to be taught and believe that the person talking the loudest and longest is winning, whatever that means, when to me, if ego shows up, it's like stop, drop, and roll, sit back, get curious, get ego off the table. And intuition, all of the language you're using is so much a part of what I believe and advocate, that empathy and intuition. So go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, real quick on that, because I would say, speaking of what you're talking about with this distorted, it's like all of our problems can be traced back into like distorted masculine and distorted feminine, and that's toxic masculinity and extreme, all of those battles that we've been having for centuries and eons of time. This is all like spirituality leaders will say, like, this is a result of the feminine energy, like basically not being there and everything being very much into the masculine and distorted masculine energy. And so this whole process, even like on an energetic level and in our society and in our progress, is the reintegration of the feminine energy, Mother Gaia and the Mother Earth, all of that. But as woo-woo as that sounds, it's really just that balancing, and it's happening between men and women. All of us now are having to like heal through the trauma
Yes.
of those wounds, and that is a mandatory process in order for us to continue to progress as humans. And that is the consciousness awakening in its bare basics. It's the distorted masculine and distorted feminine.
I like that distorted masculinity, because I had a recent epiphany about that as well. When we hear so much now about toxic masculinity, masculinity.
Yeah.
And second gentleman Emhoff was being interviewed on, I don't know, MNC or whatever it's called. And he talked about masculine toxicity. And it was a light went off for me, because I think language, it was a subtle distinction, but I thought an important one. Because when we talk about toxic masculinity, it's like the masculinity is toxic itself, which causes that pushback reflex, as opposed to, no, there's all kinds of toxicity. This just happens to be masculine toxicity. I thought it was
Right.
a distinction to make. So I'd
Definitely.
love some practical techniques maybe that you have that can help us break free from some of these limiting beliefs we're talking about that have been holding us back from achieving our negotiation goals, negotiating our best life.
So are you talking like day-to-day practices of like what people can do in this regard?
Well, either you can start high level and work down if you want, but how do you incorporate this concept of ascension into some actual sort of techniques that can help us negotiate our best lives?
Right. Well, like for me, I like to talk to clients about where they're experiencing friction and problems, or just, challenges in life. I mean,
Yeah.
really, it depends on the individual. And this is where we identify, like, a lot of times our interpersonal relationships are the first cause of like pattern behavior and limiting beliefs, and having to kind of do the work in order to break through to get successful results, at the other side. So when I work with clients, it depends on where people are at. Sometimes it's a business issue. Sometimes it's a, whatever, like they want to grow in certain ways and they're encountering barriers. And then you identify the patterns and what's going on there. And then it's kind of like life coaching. And what I like to do is I refer people based on what the problem is in their life, because I operate as a consultant. So I'm like the go-to person that you want to come to, where you will get a map, a plan of action and where you want to go. And then I refer people to their best practitioner or healer or consultant or coach or whatever they need in that regard. And then that's how people can move forward. So it's a very collaborative process also, because, not people need different things to go through this journey. And that's where I created the Unity Consciousness Collective. So that's my network of healers and different people that are knowledgeable in certain areas, and they get clients and things that they do for their work. Yeah. So it's all based off of the specific problem and what you're trying to achieve. Just like if you had, okay, I need my map to my law of attraction life, right? Yeah. Like that's it takes a lot of steps. It's different directions depending on where you are, where you want to go. And so, it's kind of like that. Every problem has a different solution.
Nice. So the idea of ascension, I take it sort of like ascending or rising into the highest version of ourselves as our energy's improved. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, now people talk a lot about the law of attraction, but it's not as simple as, oh, I'm going to manifest my ideal car and then my ideal house and my ideal. It's like you have to go through this healing and this dark night of the soul process. And people talk about the shadow work and the relationship breakdown, and the spiritual journey being far more difficult than anyone is expecting. So, things like that happen. And so this is all part of that process, and having important understanding of what's going on is very important as we all are doing this. Yeah.
And it's beautiful. I see it as a really important part of the preparation process. I often say in negotiation, everybody thinks it's all about leverage and power. But I think preparation is probably more important than whatever leverage you bring to the table, more important even than your skill set. And part of that preparation that gets ignored the most often is raising our awareness about the conditioning that we bring to the table, those biases that we bring to the table, some of that baggage we bring to the table, all of those limiting beliefs that hold us back. So such important work as part of that prep. Now, how can we cultivate a strong sense of self-worth? It sounds like you do sort of a lot of that, and that authenticity to negotiate with confidence.
Oh, wow. So I believe, self-worth, I mean, how to cultivate that is part of this. It's part of the process, I think, that we all experience when we're battling our own inner, you're not good enough talk, or this isn't going to happen for you, or you just can't do this right. All of those are kind of the negative whispers that we hear. And so we have to identify where those come from, with what's creating that environment in our minds, and then, our subconscious mind, and then reprogramming it so that our conscious mind experiences a different reality. And so all of that is really working to generate our self-worth so that we can achieve those higher vibe results that we want.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really a big part of it.
I love that. And I think, confidence is such an important part of negotiating our best life. And I think, again, people have this mistaken idea of confidence being that bluff and bluster to the table, but it really comes more from just a deep self-awareness and, self-love, as corny as that may sound to some people. And I'd love, what role do you think mindfulness plays in this process?
Well, it all comes back to the mind, body, spirit connection that we
Yeah.
recognize as now like a holistic thing that we have to be healthy on all these levels. And reprogramming your mindset is part of this process about, well, for me, I like to logically understand things. So, it takes like a lot of, if you have a certain background or tradition or belief system, you have to logically be able to explain what's happening and where you're going with this and why you're putting energy towards this. And so, when people are getting started in programming their mindset, they have to understand concepts like how the subconscious mind interacts with the conscious mind, and hypnosis can be, and then memories.
Yeah.
It's like it's the whole that's the process I went through, and
Yeah.
then that takes you into this like whole like universe opens up. So yeah, I think that mindset is where it starts. Looking, like one of my memes I created is introspection is the inflection point of healing. So,
Nice.
we look within, we're introspecting, and then that's where our healing begins, when we
Yeah.
start to look within, love ourselves unconditionally, and all those things people talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fine. I mean, it's starting to get traction now. And again, I think people thought it was woo woo, but I'm a big believer that, the power of our thoughts, that our thoughts determine our reality, because the meaning that we attach to things creates the energy, and where our focus goes, that's where our energy flows. And I don't,
Yes.
do you have any tips on, how can we better manage our thoughts, right? So that we can create better realities and show up as those better versions of ourselves to get those better, more collaborative outcomes.
Right. Well, I happen to write a book on that very subject. So it's
Perfect.
Ascension is the New Attraction, and it's broken up in really readable, like kind of chunks. People like that. Read a section or two a night, and it walks through all of the ways in which we can, do this reprogramming work. Understand it's like basically a manifestation, like a manual on how to, best have the manifestation activated in this ascension process. So, people like books like that, or they, want to understand the latest and things that are happening. I think that, yeah, that's a great way to start. There's certain common themes like meditation practices, things that like get us to this point, like doing yoga or stretching, whatever you resonate
Yeah.
with, for meditation and like mental health standpoint, self-care, all of the things, unconditional love, so we have a lot to write about on that.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I can't believe how quick our time has gone here.
Oh,
It's just,
oh my gosh.
I'm having shorter episodes now, and I am really struggling keeping within the time limits, especially when I'm having these interesting conversations. And I so appreciate the perspective that you're bringing to the table.
I love it.
And I normally like to end by asking, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? And it doesn't have to be on this topic at all, Edina. It can be on just one of those moments in life where it shifted how you look at things or showed up.
The biggest shift that happened to me was, like I talked earlier about empathy and understanding like what role that played in my life, where I had areas of kind of a lack of empathy, and I had maybe more ego based, like it's kind of in this world of like ego mastery, we talk about that, and that's a huge spiritual topic, but
Yeah.
really it is that process. And so when I realized that, I had problems, quote unquote, or blockages in my
Yeah.
own empathy and my understanding and my emotional intelligence, and what I got my breakthrough was really like looking within and healing my own self, and what I have, like, any negative energy problems that I was able to identify and help my own personal relationship. So that was when it was for me, was really having a real understanding of myself and having a new lens to look at things. That's when I developed the biggest breakthrough spiritually.
Oh, that's a huge breakthrough. I think, I mean, but both spiritually and practically, I think people underestimate. And I like that you're talking about this idea of empathy because I think people really misunderstand it, right? I hear a lot of people go, oh, I don't, they're not going to convince me. I don't believe in you don't have to agree, right? The
Yeah.
idea of empathy is just put yourself truly in the shoes of the other person. Get totally curious, right? As you said, surrender the ego and truly seek to understand and if possible, meet their needs, right? I think that's the only way we're really going to see profound shift. And I interviewed somebody recently who talked about love, and I'm sure a lot of people will sort of poo-poo the idea, but she said at its core, everything about negotiating comes down to coming from a place of love. And that really resonated with me. And I think that's consistent
Yeah,
with
that's
saying
what's
that
saying, like,
empathy.
from empathy and love, it's all the heart
Yeah.
connection. And even what you were saying with people, it's funny when you realize that other people's reality are in fact very, it's just as true for them as it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
and it's like, and that's where it goes into other concepts, like we're all connected consciousness, and it's like we just have to, this is the mirror of our own things and things like that. But yeah, you really come to a place where, yeah, that person really lives in a totally separate reality, and it takes so much empathy
Yeah.
to break down whatever barrier is there. And that's kind of what we're supposed to be doing as humans, right? And like in
Yeah.
our love journey and all of that. Yeah.
And
Spiritual
especially in our negotiations. I mean, you
in our
just hit the nail
negotiation.
on the head, right? It's about that. We need to be able to connect and break down those areas where there's that lack of connection. I think that's so important. And when you talked about that connection piece, I remember about a decade ago being stunned by that study they did where they took two atoms, I think it was, and just introduced them to each other briefly. And then they separated the atoms and put them in, I don't know, some lead-based containers, like way apart from each other. And when they changed the direction that the one atom was spinning
The
in,
other one did it
the
too.
other one did too, like
Well,
miles away. It was so mind-boggling to me about the extent to which we're connected. If we could only remind ourselves of that.
yeah, that's like
Activity.
that was the foundational principles, like behind physics, and time and space
Yeah.
doesn't matter. I've had guests on my show talking about that exact kind of example where they started to prove this time space reality is really, this goes into the whole,
Yeah.
is reality an illusion,
Yeah.
we get into all of it. But yeah, it is definitely powerful stuff. And we only need to go into it as much as we really want, but basically, just understanding certain principles of the universe that can benefit our lives on a daily basis is
Mm.
the most important place to start, I think.
Oh, that was so perfectly said. Because it just a millisecond before you said it, I was thinking for our listeners out there, you don't have to buy into everything. If this is a new concept for you to be considering, if it seems too much, this whole idea about questioning sort of our reality, just start from that place of empathy, start from that place of love. And when you're seeking to negotiate your best life, seek to understand, right? Seek to get curious, embrace life with the art of fascination. I think that's such beautiful advice you've given us, Edina, today. So
Amazing.
thank you. Where can people find out more about you? Where do you want us to send them?
Yeah, well, my Instagram is my primary social channel right now. So it's at Edina Mauvana, and also my website, www.edinamovana.com. And my book is available on Amazon. So that's good. Ascension is the new attraction. And, I have a saying, I was just putting together a meme, but it's like all of us are only one referral away from our most, dream experience, life experience, right? And
Yeah.
I am also here for people who want referrals, or they want to know more about a certain thing and they just want to go, figure out what to do or how to start this journey. So that's a big part of what I do, as like, putting people in touch and figuring out what the issue is. So yeah, I'm starting to take on my website, people can book a quick call, and also through my social media. So yeah, that would be great
Oh,
if anyone's interested.
such a nice approach. I think, for so long we've come from the scarcity mindset, and I'm a big believer when we come from an abundance mindset, there is enough of everything for everyone. And the more we lift each other up, the more it benefits all of us. So I think that's beautiful.
Absolutely
And
amazing.
really encourage our listeners out there, check out that book again. Ascension is the new attraction. And also not just check it out, but getting reviews can be painstaking for a book, and it makes a big difference. So get the book, leave a darn review, right? So it does make a difference. Amazon will promote the book more based on the number of books. It'll give organic promotion when books have a higher number of reviews. So if it's a subject that resonates with you, think of it as a gift. When you give a review, you're actually giving a gift to other people by letting them be more aware about the book. So definitely check that out. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And thank you so much, Edina, for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you, Cindy. It was amazing. I really appreciate it.
And for our listeners, I'm sure you got lots of value from this episode. It was a super interesting discussion packed with all kinds of little nuggets to think about so that you can show up differently to negotiate your best life. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that already, and share it with as many people as you can. The more we get this message out, the more we shift out of that competitive model, the more the world will come into balance, and we'll all have a better experience to be able to negotiate our best possible lives. And before we sign off today, just want to share, as always, just a few ways we can work together. If you are looking to up-level your negotiation skills and recognize that all of life is a negotiation, I've got everything from online to group to my signature VIP or mastermind programs, where I can help you leverage your innate power to get more of what you want and deserve in life in ways that benefit everybody. So if that sounds interesting to you, check out the artoffemininenegotiation.com. Again, feel free to check out the book as well, artoffemininenegotiation.com. I'll make sure to put all of Edina's information in our show notes for you. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.